This episode discusses disappearance, suspected homicide, and distressing details surrounding mental health and loss. Listener discretion is advised. If you or someone you know needs support, help is available in Australia through Lifeline on 131114 or Beyond Blue on 1300 224 636. Some stories stay with you the moment you hear them. Julie Cutler's is one of those. It wasn't the headline that caught me or the mystery of her car found in the surf. It was something quieter. The sense of a young woman who'd done everything right, who was simply living her life and somehow still became a question no one could answer. In June 1988, Julie left a staff awards night at the Parmelia Hilton in Perth CBD. She never made it home. 2 days later, her small Fiat was found upside down in the surf at Cottesloe Beach. Lights on, ignition running, keys still in the dash. But there was no trace of Julie. Over the decades, theories would pile up like the tide, some calling it an accident, others believing she met with foul play. But what remains constant is this: a daughter, a sister, a woman, still waiting to be found. I think what drew me to Julie's story is that it could have been anyone's story. A night out with colleagues, a short drive home, moments we move through without thinking. But when you grow up hearing stories like hers, you learn to walk differently through the world, hold your keys that bit tighter, and you check the shadows twice. Because women are still expected to be careful when what we should be is safe. This is Vanished West, Episode 2, Julie Cutler, The Car in the Sea. Before she became a case file, Julie Leanne Cutler was a daughter, a sister, a friend. Born and raised in Perth's western suburbs, the eldest of 4 children, she grew up in a close family that valued education and curiosity. She attended Iona Presentation College in Mosman Park, where teachers described her as creative, bright, and compassionate. Friends described her as confident but kind, a girl who would comfort the shy one in class, who scribbled poetry into the margins of notebooks and dreamed of seeing Europe. After school, she worked in hospitality while studying communications and theatre, chasing auditions between shifts. In 1988, she was working at the Parmelia Hilton, one of Perth's grand hotels in the city's heart, known for its long hours and lively staff. Julie was saving money, thinking about travel again. She'd had her share of heartbreak, a difficult relationship overseas, a time when her confidence had faltered. But by winter 1988, those close to her said she'd found her footing. She was happy, independent, and looking ahead. She'd just bought her first car, a small dark green Fiat 500, quirky, personal, and proudly hers. Her father, Roger Cutler, remembered how she parked it neatly outside the family home on her days off, proud of the little freedom it represented. Sunday, 19 June 1988. Perth was cold and wet, the kind of winter night that soaks through coats and closes streets early. Inside the Parmelia Hilton, the annual staff awards night was underway, with music, laughter, champagne, and sequins. Julie arrived dressed in black, cheerful, and social. She danced, chatted, accepted a glass of champagne from colleagues, and enjoyed the night. Several remembered her speaking with 2 European men who worked casually at the hotel. Others said she'd seemed distracted near the end of the night, checking the time, saying she might meet someone afterwards. Just after 12:30 a.m, she told a co-worker she was heading home. One colleague saw her drive her Fiat out of the car park and turn left onto Mounts Bay Road. It was raining steadily. That was the last confirmed sighting of Julie Cutler. When Julie didn't arrive at work the next day, some assumed she'd taken leave or stayed with a friend. It wasn't until Tuesday morning, 2 days later, that a Cottesloe ranger noticed something metallic beneath the surf. The tide was high and the wind fierce. 50 metres offshore, lying on its roof in the shallows, was a small Fiat, Julie's Fiat. The headlights were off, but the ignition still on. The windows were down, the handbrake released. 2 champagne flutes wrapped in a tea towel sat inside the glove box. Her handbag, shoes, and coat were gone. Police divers retrieved the car that afternoon. The roof was crushed, the body salt-eaten, but the registration was clear. Inside, nothing to suggest a struggle, nothing to prove she'd been alone. The Cutler family rushed to Cottesloe as word spread through Perth. Roger Cutler stood on the sand and watched as officers hauled the Fiat from the waves. Forensic work was slow and limited. It was 1988, before DNA analysis became routine, and the sea had stripped most traces away anyway. There were no fingerprints beyond Julie's. Officers speculated about suicide, about accident, about a car forced into the water. But no one could explain how the Fiat had ended up 50 metres out to sea. Over the following days, fragments washed ashore. A back seat, torn upholstery, pieces of lining. Searches by air and sea turned up nothing else. Julie's body was never found. The initial inquiry focused on her personal life. Police interviewed family, friends, and workmates, collecting small pieces of a picture. A young woman who sometimes felt lonely but was rebuilding, optimistic, funny, and warm. When no evidence of foul play surfaced, investigators leaned towards a voluntary disappearance or suicide. In media reports that winter, headlines described "Mystery of Cottesloe Beauty," romanticising rather than investigating. It was the late 1980s. Missing women were still too often treated as impulsive, emotional, or reckless. Julie's parents insisted otherwise. They told police she'd been planning her next trip, looking forward to new work. Her father was quoted saying, "She wouldn't have done this, not Julie." As weeks passed with no progress, the file thinned. The car was eventually released and later destroyed. Evidence logs went missing. In those gaps, the administrative kind that no one notices until decades later, the possibility of answers disappeared too. Time dulled nothing for the Cutler family. Roger and Diana kept her case alive, writing to politicians, speaking to journalists, calling detective each time a new body was found along the coast. Leads came and went. Anonymous calls were made, one by a man with a European accent claiming to know what happened. He rang several times saying he was the one you're looking for, then hung up. He was never traced. Pausing for a moment here, I just want to call out what an incredibly cruel and heartless thing something like that is. Even if you were the perpetrator, I can't fathom what the family would have been going through in those moments, receiving those calls and the time after, just waiting. In 1990, a woman found a Hilton uniform blouse in a city laundromat. Years later, Julie's purse and diary turned up in the dunes near Cottesloe, half buried. Each discovery reignited hope, then ended the same way. No usable evidence, no closure. Through the 1990s and 2000s, community interest ebbed and flowed. Online discussion groups and small true crime blogs would later revisit her case, comparing notes, building timelines, criticising the investigation. Some pointed to the Hilton men. Others speculated about serial offenders active around Perth in that era. None had proof, but their persistence mattered. It kept her name searchable, her story visible in a way official channels had not. In 2017, Western Australian Police announced a comprehensive review, Operation Malvi. Cold case detectives re-examined everything, old statements, photographs, ocean current modelling. They listed 48 persons of interest. Among them were several men linked to the Hilton, and others considered in related disappearances. Even the Claremont killer, Bradley Robert Edwards, was evaluated. He declined interview, but that's no surprise as he hasn't exactly admitted to anything in any police interview to date. And besides, police found no link strong enough to evaluate him beyond possible interest. Two other men, David Troy Masters and Azizul bin Azadin, were publicly ruled out. Detectives told the coroner that what remained of the evidence was fragmentary. Key exhibits, car seats, glass samples, early witness notes were gone. Photographs showed items now missing from storage. They concluded the case could no longer be proved one way or another. For the Cutler family, that was the hardest truth. Not that Julie's death couldn't be solved, but that it might have once been. It took 34 years for Julie's name to return to a courtroom. In November 2022, the Western Australia's Coroner's Court opened an inquest into her disappearance. Her family sat in the gallery, older now, but still carrying the same quiet determination that had kept her case alive for so long. Detective Sergeant Adrian Emery from the Cold Case Homicide Squad summarised the investigation for the court. He explained that police had reviewed every available document, re-interviewed original witnesses, and identified 48 persons of interest. He spoke carefully, admitting that while both suicide and homicide were possible, there wasn't enough surviving evidence to prove either. One by one, the failures surfaced. Exhibits destroyed, documents misplaced. Even photographs of the car's interior that no longer existed in archives. It was, in the words of Deputy State Coroner Sarah Linton, an investigation constrained by the limits of time and loss. Julie's father, Roger, gave a statement describing the decades of uncertainty his family had endured. He said, "It's hard to even remember what life was like before Julie went missing. It changes everything about how you live." He spoke with grace, but his words carried exhaustion. The kind of ache that comes from spending half a lifetime waiting for the phone to ring. In April 2023, the coroner handed down her findings. Julie Cutler, she concluded, was deceased. The manner of death could not be determined. An open finding. It was officially closure. But to those who loved her, it was the opposite. Confirmation that the system still didn't know and maybe never would. After the inquest, the story spread again. ABC News, the West Australian Perth Now, and several podcasts revisited Julie's disappearance. Online forums filled with strangers dissecting timelines, speculating on leads, sharing theories born from hope as much as frustration. Some commenters had followed the case since the 90s. They remembered the bone found on Cottesloe Beach, confirmed to be human. They remember the anonymous phone calls. They remember how Julie's Fiat, small, symbolic, almost fragile, came to represent every woman who walked home and didn't arrive. Not all those discussions are comfortable to read, but they do serve a purpose that the system rarely manages. They keep her name alive. In those threads, in those community archives, Julie exists not as a file, not as a number, but as a person. And in a strange way, that's its own form of justice, remembrance as resistance. There's a kind of fear that lodges deep, especially for women. You carry it quietly, the way you might carry your phone like a torch between dark car parks at night. You tell your friends, share your location, text me when you get home. You grip your keys between your fingers, rehearsing safety as though it's second nature. When I was younger and working in hospitality, I used to take a bottle opener with me everywhere. The small metal kind that you clip to your belt. Not just for work, but because I walked home along dark streets after closing shifts. It wasn't a weapon, not really. Just something solid to hold, something that made me feel I wasn't completely defenseless. Back then, there was no Snapchat location to share, no group chats checking in every 5 minutes. We relied on instinct and the quiet hope that that would be enough. I think about Julie's night often. The ordinary ritual of leaving work, the sound of rain on the windscreen, that short drive towards the coast. She couldn't have known that something as simple as heading home would become her final act. Stories like Julie's are why women still learn to move differently through the world. We shouldn't have to. We should be free to walk, drive, or breathe without fear. but we still whisper safety tips to one another as if it's survival and it's a skill that we must pass down. When the system fails to protect us, it's not just evidence that's lost, it's faith. Faith that will be searched for with urgency. Faith that our stories will be believed. Faith that our disappearances will matter. Julie's story reminds us what happens when the faith is misplaced. When a missing woman becomes a curiosity instead of a priority. It's easy to think that that was another time, another era. But every time I walk alone at night and notice myself speeding up, checking the shadows, I know it isn't over. The sea still moves in and out of Cottesloe, the way it did the morning Julie's car was found. People swim, laugh, live, unaware of what lies just beneath the breakers. Somewhere beneath that surface is the truth. Maybe it's gone, maybe it's waiting to be found. If you remember anything suspicious from around Sunday 19th of June 1988, any sightings of Julie Cutler, her dark green Fiat, or anyone acting strangely near Cottesloe Beach or Mounts Bay Road, please contact Crime Stoppers WA on 1800 333 000 or submit a confidential report at www.crimestopperswa.com.au. For Julie's family, the search has never really stopped. For the rest of us, remembering her might be the only justice left. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and never forget those who vanished from the West.